Mark Warner, member of the Budget Committee. Good morning, Senator. We would have gotten, someone on the other side of the aisle to argue with you, but we've been unsuccessful. God, what a love fest we've had with people on both sides of the aisle.
Well, welcome to the theater to the absurd. I mean, you shared that earlier comment about Pee Wee Herman's head. You could say the same thing about what's in some folks' heads in Washington, because, we're a couple days away from shutting down the government, and I'd like to take some of these senators down to Norfolk and Hampton Roads, where the admiral down there said, come next week, 66,000 soldiers and sailors are going to go to work without a paycheck. 22,000 shipyard workers are going to be told to stay home. This is crazy.
And you are someone that acknowledges that Obamacare, there's some things that we ought to try to figure out. Yeah,
absolutely. But this is not about Obamacare. You want to have a rational argument or discussion about what's good in it, what's bad in it, where do we fix things like this ridiculous disincentive to hire people full-time with this 30-hour cutoff. That's a legitimate discussion. This is kind of political theater at its worst, when at the core, what we ought to be talking about is how we get our nation's balance sheet back right, which means both political parties are going to have to give. Republicans are going to have to give on revenues. Democrats are going to have to give on entitlements. And until we can get back to some rational budgeting approach, we're going to go through this, every few months. Remember, this week is just a warm-up for what we may be doing in a couple weeks, when we literally got folks up here who say even if America defaults, it will make a big difference.
Senator, you're a huge private sector guy. You had a great line. You were the first person in your family to make $200 million, I think was your line. Wasn't that? That was such a...
Well, listen, this economy was... Cell phones were really, really good to me, and I hate to see the notion that the next generation of folks aren't going to get the same kind of opportunities I got, because we're going to be saddling them with, right now, $17 trillion of debt and counting.
How about this? How about we assume that there is some leverage on either side in what's coming up, and we try to do something to leverage one or the other side to do something in the long-term best interest of the country. Is that possible?
Listen, there are a group of us, Bob Corker and I, there was my old gang of 6. There are an awful lot of senators in both parties who are, frankly, up to here with the kind of antics back and forth. But what we've got playing out right now is a delay tactic that I think, chances are you could see a government shutdown. And I just want some of these senators to, travel with me down to some of these families who aren't going to get a paycheck, and the level of uncertainty.
Anything with entitlements that you think that the two could come together, or tax reform, or you want to do sequestration, but you just want to raise more revenue or something?
Sequestration is stupidity on steroids.
Right.
There is a way to cut government in a way that is a lot smarter than sequestration. We got the House plan that would actually, in about a dozen years, take total federal government spending on education, infrastructure, and R&D down to less than 5% of our spend. No business would invest in that kind of business plan. What do we need to do is, I do think we need to generate some more revenues through tax reform. I do think we need to look at how we bring down the cost of sequestration. I've looked at means testing. I've looked at age. I've looked at consumer change CPI. I got a list of about 10 different things I think ought to be part of the discussion. But it means both parties got to get serious about this.
But, Senator, the president has said he won't negotiate on this point. Are those things like change CPI, are they still on the table? And how do you have a constructive conversation about that?
Well, listen, the president laid this out in the budget. It took the Senate a long time to pass the budget, I'll acknowledge. We got a budget we passed. The House had a budget. We can't even get to a conference committee to have a debate about this. The one thing I do agree with the president, and candidly, I supported the president, not Governor Romney, but I hope that Governor Romney would have said the same thing if he'd been elected. You can't have the full faith and credit of the United States of America be regularly used as a debating point. No national power has ever defaulted and maintained itself as a world power.
No, Senator, I don't know, how many jobs do you think you were responsible for creating?
Listen, it was in the tens of thousands, because I was the co-founder of Nextel.
Have you ever, we've talked a lot of times, and have you ever just raised your hand maybe with the White House and just said, the private sector is really effective at creating jobs and raising tax revenue, and and doing a lot of things that, quite frankly, the government is not effective at doing. Have you
yeah, I've raised my hands with both folks in the administration.
You still get invited back?
And I've raised my hand, though, with folks who I work with here, who I remember, you know, and I'm not saying this is not, some of the antics that are going on right now aren't reflective of the Republican Party. We've got a group of folks here whose goal is, I'm not sure what their goal is.
How about your side, though? It's easy to bash them, but...
No, I'm not bashing. Listen, I'm not...
But you can get too far on the government bandwagon, can't you, Senator? Haven't we gone too far down that... Aren't we seeing that? Aren't we reaping what we've sown there to some extent with this economy?
Percentage of government, percentage of spending on domestic programs now is smaller, on discretionary programs now, smaller than during Eisenhower.
But it just seems like a lot of the solutions seem to be, when you talk to, you know, the Democrats, seem to be government solutions. They don't seem to be private sector solutions.
No, listen, I'm a private sector guy. That's where we're going to have the economic growth. But if we're going to have that economic growth, I do believe we got to have an educated workforce. Yeah. I do believe we got to have infrastructure. And as we've seen the private sector lay off more and more of the R&D onto the public sector side, we got to have that kind of investment as well. Yeah. Can we do it in a more rational way? Absolutely. We never even got a vote on the Simpson-Bowles plan.
No, I know. Oh, that's not. But again, you can't blame just the Republicans for that.
Listen, there's blame to go around on both sides, but occasionally, it ought to be not red shirt, blue shirt, but it ought to be how we keep America competitive in this very challenging global economy.
Can you send me a list of some of the guys you're talking about with that Pee Wee Herman side? I'd like to know which guys in Washington you're referring to.
You know, I'll just let your mind wander on that one.
All right, Senator. We always enjoy having you on, and you know, you talk to Corker, you reach across the aisle. One of these days, this is going to bear some fruit. Hopefully, in our lifetime. You know what I mean? I don't know.
You got to stay positive, or I'm in the wrong line of business.
Man, it's not easy down there. All right.